Previously on my dream bike build, we stripped the bike right down to a bare frame. I ground back basically all of it to remove any and all surface corrosion, and then the frame, crash bars and swinging arm got a respray in gloss black. That's stage 1 done. Now, does anyone remember how it goes back together? The day starts by laying down a clean sheet to prevent marking the fresh paintwork before carrying everything into the garage. In the time it takes me to make the tea, Dad's already refitted the side stand. Behold, side stand is working and looking magnificent. The theme of this build is no better time to do it than when the bike's in bits, so a new rear sprocket's going on before we refit the rear wheel. A few love taps helps the bolts crack, and after removing the old sprocket, cleaning the bolts up and screwing in the new one, the bolts are torqued up. Yeah, oh wow, that was literally already there. Lovely. That looks excellent. Nice. We can't mount the rear wheel until there's something to mount it to, so next, chain guard fitted, the swinging arm is bolted back into the frame, complete with copious amounts of grease and, naturally, talking to spec.
That's it.
Hey!
Lovely.
Right, hang on, don't let it fall over now.
No, but it's alright.
There you go.
One job done.
Swinging arm mounted. I'm not going to say in, but mounted.
Okay.
I think we celebrate with a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Without suspension, the swinging arm will droop and smash into the frame. So next, Dad mounts up both rear shocks while I hold the frame steady, with some spare Seicento sound deadening cushioning the frame just in case. Right, let's see how well this works then.
Right, slide that through there.
Finally, the rear wheel can be fitted. Dad lifts it into place and I persuade the greased axle bolt to slide through the wheel and the spacer. After some wiggling, it slots through the other side and into the swinging arm. Yes, yeah, we're in. Right. Then the end plates go on. Don't worry, I painted them later, and the securing nut is screwed onto the axle. Rear wheel in now then?
Yeah, I mean it's got to be bolted and chained and everything else, but it's
physically in, yeah.
It's not going to fall out, yeah.
I like that, that's what we're going with. Essentially, it's not going to fall out. That's good enough. The final thing needed to stand the frame up is the centre stand. The buffer and the stand itself are bolted together onto the frame before the spring is stretched between the two, and just like that, we've got a functional centre stand with some strong spring action. New headstock bearings transform the handling of an old bike. I speak from experience. First, the lower bearing race is tapped out of the frame, and then the upper race, complete with gratuitous foam to avoid it flying out and chipping the paint. The new upper race gets well greased before being hammered into the frame with a block of wood so it goes in level.
This is what you had done on your YBR.
On my YBR, yeah. I miss my YBR, it's so good. But this is better, so yeah. Next, the frame gets flipped back over to finish the job. I grease up the lower race before repeating the hammer it in evenly with a block of wood technique we used on the top. I used the old race as a guide to locate the new one, so the old one then gets gently tapped out once again. There we go. Bye bye. The new bearings are tapered, an upgrade over standard ball bearings for longevity and smooth movement, apparently. The fork yoke is removed from the front end assembly and the lower bearing greased before being tapped into the frame. I didn't film any of this because I'm clever, so you're watching me grease the upper bearing before slotting it over the yoke once it's through the frame. The protective plate and securing ring are slotted over the yoke before being tightened up. And then, time for a test drive. That's better. Yeah, we'll go with that. It's delicious and it's quiet and it's smooth and it's greased up to the nines.
Oh, that's good. That's all the old bearings.
Lovely. Now, at the risk of coining a cliche, we are still not out of the woods yet, because the observant amongst you will note there is a considerable amount missing. With all the new headstock bearings in, it's time to marry the two halves of the bike back together. We wheel the front end over to the frame and I lift the frame over the forks and slot them through the yoke. Or attempt to. With the weight of everything, cables hanging everywhere and the wheel wanting to roll away, it's really awkward to get everything lined up straight and at the correct height. After more swearing than I can put on YouTube, by some miracle we get both the forks in place, the central bolt in, the forks secured thanks to the magnificence of ratchet spanners, and everything torqued up. With the handlebars remounted, next it's time to start running all the wiring and cables through the frame, working out where the wiring for lights, earths and sensors will eventually plug in without getting crushed when you steer. With some things back in place and tidied up, as well as the headlight back on, it's starting to look more like a bike again. You know, apart from the obvious. The next day it's time to get the engine in, and to protect all the freshly painted bits, we start by wrapping the frame in plenty of foam. We can then lift the freshly painted engine off the table down onto some blocks of wood. And here at Miller Corner we pride ourselves on professional level videography. The best bit of filming you've ever seen on YouTube. Right. Fitting the engine is even more delicate than removing it now that everything's painted. The frame curves over the engine, so some bricks under the centre stand lift the bike up a few extra inches. We then gently slide the engine under the frame, and after making sure that everything lines up, lift it onto the jack to then roll it further under the frame and carefully jack it up into position. With the engine somewhere near, a bit of wiggling and levering lines the bolt holes up, and just lots of swearing later, we get the engine secured on the back with its bolts and bracket. And then it's on to refitting that removable bit of frame.
Right, them 4 bolts that you mentioned.
Yes, which are now 3, miraculously. There genuinely are only 3 of these, by the way. Just match it to those for me. Good. Right. This is why I told you to zip the bag up, because if you zip the bag up, you don't go putting things back in it. Once the frame's complete, the front engine bolt can go in too, making the engine finally refitted and bringing an end to a fantastic day one. It's crazy to think that this morning we carried a bare frame into the garage, and now we've got something that resembles a bike, with both stands, a swinging arm, both rear shocks, new headstock bearings, the whole front end assembly, and the engine refitted. There's no time to celebrate though. We've still got to do wiring, plumbing, cooling, bodywork, lights, rear end, exhaust.